Everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday. I apologize I had to delay this video. Unfortunately, I was pretty busy over this weekend and did not have time to upload videos, but I should be caught up by the end of today as of Wednesday. So without further ado, for this particular Animation Friday, I thought it would be interesting to briefly dive into as to whether or not animation in particular is becoming more accessible to use. In other words, is animation becoming a lot easier to sort of produce on a more broader level? And I think there's a certain amount of truth in saying yes, because now, since the rise of the internet, since the rise of even animation software, you can sort of play around and sort of make your own thing out of animation, which really hasn't been seen on this kind of level before. It's really interesting to see people being able to do sort of even from the comfort of their own home, their own styles and their own ways of interpreting a various character, whatnot. And a lot of that has been allowed through the technology, and it also is not necessarily as expensive in certain areas, really, and it kind of really depends though too. But really, it is becoming something that I think is a lot more easier to get into, at least in understanding how to produce something that is animated or that is related to animation, than it was previously. And again, the rise of the internet has really allowed this to really emerge. And what is also, I think, good is that this will allow, again, a more broader range of creativity, and people will be able to kind of have access that probably wouldn't have been possible before. But I think there is still some limitations in this area as far as one's ability to really create animation. And that has to do with the fact that usually when it comes to feature length, it is kind of sort of difficult to really spend all your time and effort to try to make something that's sort of more feature length in nature, because animation is difficult in certain respects. It's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world, as maybe some people may think. And to create something that is really full length takes a significantly longer time and a lot more effort and a lot more, at least, things to be utilized than it does than just producing a however long short that maybe goes 10 minutes or something like that. You know, it's really different when you look at 10 minutes as opposed to like an hour and a half. So I think in those areas, this is where animation still is kind of secluded to the bigger animated studio companies like Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks and etc. But eventually, it will probably become a lot more easier, because as far as over time is concerned, usually things seem to at least decrease in price. Like, for example, computers back in the day used to be worth thousands of dollars, but now they're worth like hundreds of dollars. So they've gone down as far as the pricing, and therefore have become a lot more accessible. And I think the same thing will sort of happen with animation, in that people will be able to kind of create their own thing a lot easier than maybe they would have before. And I think this is ultimately a good thing, and I think this creates, again, a new level of freedom for artists and artistry that we haven't seen before, because you know, your limitations really were hinged on being really based within perfection, at least back in the days when, even before we had computers, you know, where you had to draw everything out and really create the moving images and do so in a way to where it appears sort of relatively realistic. But now with computers, it makes it a lot more easier to really play around with how something moves and you know, how how a character really does look like and how you can focus in on the detailing and whatnot. Um, I think it would be nice if, ironically, if somehow uh, having more access to uh, this kind of software and whatnot with animation would allow for 2D animation to still kind of at least thrive in a sense by giving people the option to sort of stay within that format if they choose to using computers. Um, I mean, I think it would be cool if it would be possible to sort of do that, and or at least create the more traditional styling of animation using modern day technology. Um, I mean, it would, I think, be great to have that option, but it really does depend because, again, this is something that is, again, evolving, and we'll eventually see where it goes. But I think because of what we have now, we have a lot more capability than what we had previously. But I think also too is you know, sometimes people see animation more so, unless you work for major studios, more of a hobby rather than really something that you know you're really dedicated full time to. And I think that also is something that really kind of limits people as far as being able to really explore and, you know, create really in-depth and insightful commentary onto things or create their own unique animation. Um, and eventually it would be nice to see this being able to just, you know, again, just create something just out of yourself. But we'll see ultimately, I think, what happens with this. I mean, it's still got some ways to go as far as it being very uh, accessible to the point where it's a lot easier for individuals to have sort of control of media, which I think is great, and again is something that the internet has allowed people to sort of utilize. Again, and it's not to say even too that the main studios even aren't necessarily bad at animation either, or can't, you know, or who aren't trying really hard to make creative artistry. I just think that in certain respects there is probably going to be uh, more accessible animated films, and I think that's sort of a good thing because it is sort of very limited as far as children's entertainment is concerned. I mean, you know, you get thousands of titles every year, you know, for adults, and then you have only a certain sector for kids. But imagine if that were to even rise even further, and heck, even creating animation for adults too. So uh, it'll be interesting to see. I think eventually that's where it's going to go, like how a lot of the things that have come out of the internet have gone, you know, to the point where a lot of people are getting their entertainment more so from the internet as opposed to traditional forms of media. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this topic. I'd be more than happy to hear what anybody else has to say and what they think in regards to this sort of growing trend. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.